Right? So we've heard the immunization debate time and time again here on Smile Jamaica. Some parents stand by it. Some say, you know what, leave things to nature. Now, it was recently announced that a $1 million fine or prison time will take effect if children are not vaccinated. But is it right to impose this on parents? Well, pediatrician Dr. Anona Griffith is here, and she's going to weigh in on the issue. Morning. Welcome to Smile Jamaica.
Morning, Dr. Griffith. How are you?
I'm fine. How are you?
We're here.
It's a touchy subject.
Very.
Let me start first by saying, why are some parents against immunization? What do they think is the challenge?
Well, some persons have, there are various reasons. Some people have issues with, one, the number of vaccines that are given. Some have issues based on religious beliefs. Some believe in nature running its course, basically, and not interfering with the progress of nature. And for some, I think it's probably a lack of education or a lack of understanding about the fact that we live in a community. It's a global village. We're all traveling. We have to interact with people, and we're all susceptible to diseases, which can be prevented using vaccines.
Let's look at what is the difference, or let's explain immunization and vaccination. What actually happens when you are vaccinated? What's that process?
Okay, so vaccination is the process of giving a weakened portion of a disease-causing entity, which in itself, once done, does not produce disease in the person who is vaccinated. Immunization, on the other hand, is the production of immunity by the host, which is a person who was vaccinated by their own body.
So some people might have a different reaction, you know, to the vaccination. And I think that's where some of the confusion is. There's people, people are saying out there that, boy, when you vaccinate a child, they become autistic, they react differently, you know, the fever, different things, changes in their behavior. These are stories that people are telling and sharing, why some people are afraid to have their child vaccinated. Is this fact? Has this been proven? What are the studies saying? What are your observations?
Okay, so let's go back to basic principles. So once an individual is vaccinated, your body boosts or produces an immune response. And that immune response can be measured clinically and in the lab, right? Usually vaccines are given in more than one dose. It's not usually a single dose vaccine, it's usually multiple doses. And over time, the body's immunity, or the level of immunity that is produced in the body, gets to a certain level at which you're best protected. This immunity may wane over time, and then you're given a booster dose, hence the so-called booster doses that we have in our vaccine schedules. Now, a reaction to a vaccine might not necessarily be associated with the immune response, in the sense that once you introduce something into the body that is different or foreign to it, the body is going to react. One of its methods of reaction is producing chemicals that can cause a fever. So not only from a vaccine will you get a fever, but if you get a cut or a bruise, or you get a bacteria entering your body by some form of injury, you can have a fever. Right. So it's not just secondary to a vaccination per se. But some persons, especially parents, which we are aware of and we can empathize with, you don't want to see your child having any pain or discomfort or anything that's going to cause them any manner of ill health. And so once a vaccine is given or administered, if there is a response that is atypical or not like what you expect, it is thought that this is because, one, the actual vaccine is causing an adverse reaction, which might not be so. Right. If, however, an adverse reaction occurs, which would be pointed out to you before the vaccine is given by your healthcare provider, the nurses, they'll tell you, these are some of the side effects of this vaccine, these are some of the things you can expect. If that occurs, you are required to report it. So it can be documented to say this is one of the adverse reactions that we have noted from this vaccine, which is why the accountability and the documentation associated with vaccinations is so important. That's why we're able to get records and say this is our target group, this is how many children we've vaccinated over the period of time, these are how many children we have not been able to catch. Because if you would notice, and I'm sure Empress will tell you, when you look in the passport, which is the immunization record, you will notice that there are certain bits of information that is required to be documented. Not only the dose, but also the lot number and the batch number of that which was given, so that if an adverse reaction occurs, it can be traced back to that batch. So there are checks and measures and balances by which you're able to say that this is an adverse reaction versus just a regular routine reaction in response.
I think it's the adverse reaction that people are afraid of. Doc, tell me, why shouldn't it be a choice? Is it a fair that if your child isn't immunized and they are in contact with other children within a space, that there may be an issue in terms of diseases or other health problems being passed on to the other children? Why shouldn't it be okay for a parent to say, I don't want my child to be immunized?
Right, so diseases are not only passed from person to person, which is one of the most common methods of transmission, but there are diseases and viruses in our environment, as we know.
I know, so I'm saying, why shouldn't I be, maybe I should phrase it another way, why shouldn't I be able to say, okay, my child's not immunized, so I am accepting the responsibility that he may or may not be sick. Is the fear that he may make somebody else sick? Why is it a public issue?
But that's the point. You are not only exposing your child to the effects of diseases that are in the environment, but should your child contract that illness, he can pass it on to other children with whom he interacts. Because in all fairness, we are not islands and we don't live on our own, and children are part of a family. Not only is the child at risk or the other children in the household at risk, but the other individuals who interact with that child is at risk as well. So it's not just among the population of children, it's among our entire community. And I mean, it is the purview of governments to establish acts and to establish certain policies that will protect its entire population. Because if you look at it, if your productive sector becomes ill, where's your money? How are you going to produce?
You see, I want to just backtrack for a minute, because it's still, when we look at it, there's what are the vaccinations for? What are we trying to avoid? I want to go back there before we can look at what you're saying, how it affects the entire community. So what are the threats? We're looking at mumps. What are the other?
You're looking at polio. Polio itself affects the motor system. If you have somebody, and in the 1980s, there was a polio epidemic. There were people who became debilitated, disabled, were not able to be productive. They can't walk. I mean, something as simple as that, your life changes in the matter of a few hours just because you've contracted an illness which could have been prevented had you been properly vaccinated. Many of us have never seen some of these diseases, and probably will never see some of these diseases in our lifetime, simply because the initiative that was taken beforehand or ahead of us, generations ahead of us, has prevented or reduced the incidence of these diseases to such a level where we almost never see them. And so to say that, yes, it is a choice, but it's a choice that comes with a consequence.
But there is, but there really, is it really a choice? Well, yes, a fine or imprisonment is really the choice that we have, because even though it hasn't been really enforced, it is saying that the amendment to the act is saying $1 million fine if we don't do it. And so we feel like we are being forced to do it, but it is the law. And so it's really, this is another kind of humanity situation where we don't have a choice anymore, depending on where you live, as to how you medicate, how you vaccinate your child. And that is where we feel threatened, some people, we feel like we're pushed in a corner. You must do this, otherwise. But then you're saying it is for the greater good of the community. As a pediatrician,
it is.
You have seen and know that this is the best thing for a child.
When you look at what an illness can cause, a preventable illness can cause, and when you look at time at home, parents now have to stay home to care for a child. They don't necessarily have a caregiver. That's money lost. if you look at it from a dollar value, it's time and money lost. Yes, $1 million is a hefty fine, but it's more of a deterrent than a punishment. And therefore, I think it's very important for persons to look outside of their own, my one child, to see what the effect it would have on a community and a nation. Because if you look at it, I mean, if all of us were to come down with rubella is a crippling disease. You have a child who is unable to function at its own level. At the end of the day, you're going to say to yourself, maybe if I did vaccinate, maybe if I did get him immunized, I might have prevented my own child suffering the ill effects of this disease. So if you think of it on a personal level, if you think of it on a population level, there is a need for vaccination. There is a need for the thrust. And yes, I understand and empathize with some of the parents and their discussions, but I think it needs to be brought to the front that we have worked this out. Yes, there are things that you will be concerned about, and there are things that we are aware of that you will, have concerns about, and it can affect your child, and they're real. But at the same time, when you look at the rates of fall of some of these communicable diseases, such as smallpox, nobody has seen smallpox in quite a while.
And that is because we've been vaccinated.
And that is partially because we've been vaccinating.
All right.
Ooh, I
just want to know why it's a forbidden eagle after all these years.
Why can't we appeal?
A way to give the children a drop or some. Oh my God, I can't.
Some are drops. Some are needles. Most of them are needles.
We have to go. But there's something I did quickly. I heard that there's a Rastafari community that is exempt. Is that the case? Do anyone know it? Okay, we can't follow that through, but that's another day.
It's the order of the night.
We have to go. Yes.
All right, we have to go. Smiles Jamaica continues next.